Could a massive wave of particles from the sun knock out our electrical grid?
All this plasma that comes rushing towards us actually interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. And all of those energetic particles come rushing in. They can induce currents and end up overloading the system. And when you overload the power grids, it could cause blackouts.
And we're back. And today we're joined by Michael Bellemare, founder and CEO of Switch It Up Inc. How's it going, Mike?
It's going. Good to be here, Chris.
Right on. Appreciate you adjusting your schedule to meet with us. So EMPs, very top of mind for the prepping community, the survival community. But we've got some subject matter experts on staff at Survival Dispatch that are military veterans and experts. And the prospect of a EMP strike taking out all three grids across the nation is pretty slim, but the prospect of CMEs taking out large portions of our grid, if not all three grids simultaneously, is a big deal. So I just want to jump right in here. Could you tell our audience, for starters, what's a CME? What's the risk that's posed by them? And what can people do to prep against them? Or prep for them, I should say.
CME is short for Coronal Mass Ejection. It's literally a band of charged plasma particles that rip away from the sun and head towards Earth millions of miles an hour and hit the magnetosphere and can wreak havoc on satellites, radio communications, cell phone towers, and power grids.
I read somewhere that during the Carrington event in September of 1859, that it actually set some telegraph machines on fire, obviously destroyed them in the process. But we have this huge lead time for transformers, right? We don't, as far as I know, we don't make transformers domestically. Is that correct?
The parts and pieces are brought in and we put them together here, but a lot of it is brought in from out of the country, yes.
I'm thinking back a couple of years ago. I believe it was somewhere around 18 months from the time that transformers were ordered until they were actually available to be deployed at these substations. But I just read recently that it's actually 2 years now lead time and that we don't have a tremendous stockpile. So can CMEs take those substations out?
CMEs can absolutely take out the transformers and the substations. To touch on what you said about the Carrington event, 1859, those particles came in, and not only did it melt the telegraph lines off of the poles, but the units that were in the little offices where people were clicking actually burst into flames. The air in that event was so hot and charged with particles that people were jumping into ponds and lakes to avoid the charged atmosphere around them. So CMEs can do some pretty gnarly damage. And back then, that level of damage on telegraph lines, it was just copper wire at that point. You think of all of the technologies we have floating in space, radio towers, cell phone towers, all of that stuff has those sensitive electronics in there. That's essentially what gets affected by the charged particles.
So, excuse me, a CME could take out our satellites as well. Is that what you're saying? Satellites are affected, electrical grids are affected, electronic devices are affected. So this Carrington event, was that an anomaly, or is this something that goes through some sort of cycle?
The sun has a 11-year cycle that they've recorded, and when you hit that upper end of that 11-year cycle, they call it a solar maximum, and it operates like wavelength, just like electricity, AC power. You got the top at the 11th year, comes back down to 1. We are about to hit that 11th year solar maximum in 2024. And the sun has already shown that it's heating up, for lack of a better way to put it. This year alone, we've had at least half a dozen X-class flares. Once you hit the X-class, that's when the solar flare is a lot stronger, and it has that potential to cause damage to radio communications and satellites. X2 or higher is when you really start to get into the risky business of losing radio communications and things of that nature. So as we approach the solar maximum, it's very important that, especially the prepping community, we talk about this. This is something that we can insulate ourselves. There's technology on the market that exists where a GFI in your bathroom, where it pops to protect anybody from getting electrocuted, touching water and electricity. The technology that EMP Shield has put out, for example, it's a shunt that literally absorbs those charged particles and blows the shunt before it touches the sensitive electronics downstream.
Maybe you can provide a little bit of perspective here. So if we have a high altitude EMP from a nuclear warhead, the further you get away from it, the less likely that it's going to damage devices. And if you're not basically at ground zero, in a lot of instances, you can just restart a device and it comes back online. How does that play out with a CME? Like, does a CME at these X2 levels have a bigger footprint, or I'm just looking for relativity, really?
So an EMP, low altitude, low yield nuclear device going off would have a blast radius that would take out everything within the circle. A CME, on the other hand, hits the atmosphere, and our atmosphere will deflect a lot of that charged particles. But depending on where our poles are when this thing hits, if the poles are doing some of this wonky stuff where the magnetism of the Earth is flipped towards the CME, it's going to penetrate the atmosphere more and could potentially cause global scale power outages and technology being down.
The magnitude is potentially many more times than a nuclear initiated EMP.
It's I don't even know the math to tell you, but it's not centralized to a 600-mile circle or an 800-mile circle like an EMP. It could literally take out the entire country in one shot.
So the event in 1859, it's not an anomaly. There's some sort of cycle to this. How bad was that on the scale? Because I'm not familiar with the CME scale.
So that I don't have that information right now on where that was at, because in 1859 they didn't measure M class, X class. So there people say that it was definitely an X flare factor because people's skin was actually heating up where they had to jump into the water to cool off. So there's really no data that measured what that level was. But in the professional community, they say it was definitely an X level, maybe X5, X6, because of that, how people's skin was literally heating up. But an X2 today, if we were using telegraph lines, an X2 would take out telegraph lines. That was like the most common bare copper wire hanging from poles, no insulation on it whatsoever.
So if we got hit with an X2 today, what would it do to our power grid?
So an X2 with the modern system, an X2 may cause some fluctuations on the producing side. They'll see their meters kind of move a little bit. The X2s will and have affected some smaller satellite communications, but X2 always messes with radio communication. Your typical radio towers that you see all over the place, X2s disrupt the radio communications because of the frequency they use for those walkie-talkie push-button radios.
Do you want premium ad-free content? Duh. Content that's not censored by big tech, of course. Well, with SD Insider, you can get behind the scenes and a whole lot more. Link in the description.
How high does the scale go? Because I heard you say X5, X6. I was thinking tornado ratings when you said 5, and then you said 6.
The scale goes to X9. X9 is, I'm smiling when I say it, but it's not anything to smile about. An X9 is, they call it a kill shot. X9 level is basically taking the planet and putting a match to it. So
it's more than power grids.
If there's an X9, there's nothing, unless you're 2 miles down in a bunker, that's gonna save anybody. So that level hasn't ever been recorded or happened within human history. It's one of those things that scientists talk about, that if you just take the scale and you multiply it every level you go up, the sun could be capable of popping a CME, which would be a kill shot that they would call it. But there's no talk of a kill shot or any of that coming anytime soon. It's more of those X levels up to an X5. An X5 in today's world would take out the power grid, 80/60 electronics. It would smoke the transformers, and any electronics that weren't protected would just be.
So basically put us back to the dark ages.
Yes, for lack of a better term. Exactly.
So would an X5 be concentrated on one continent or one country, or would that be a global event?
It would be a global event.
Okay. All right. So
but the thing is, Chris, is we have the technology to fix it. The thing is we have 100 years of infrastructure that's gone in. The United States being as advanced as we are, we've got a third world power grid. The power grid is dubbed the glass jaw of the United States. It's an older system that we keep building on, but with the technology that's come out and some of the companies that you already know, they have protection that we could put in place, and it starts at the prepper level. It starts at the homeowner level, where you can get this technology and you can start to insulate yourself, where if something happens, you can protect your solar arrays, you can protect your inverters, you can protect your batteries, you can protect cars and RVs. But on the large scale, as this grows, we have the capability to retrofit these substations and these power stations with these devices on a larger scale, where we insulate the whole system, where the potential of being down for a year plus gets dropped to 3 to 6 months.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's kind of explore that a little bit further. Obviously, energytech.com, TEK.com, based in your neck of the woods, they're our favorite power station company. So we're not making affiliate money here. We have no affiliate relationship with them. We evaluate a ton of power stations. We've had some pretty big names. We had an EcoFlow sitting at that end of my desk 6 months ago. I'm blind in this eye. Turned around, forgot it was there. I knocked it off my desk. It shattered into a million pieces. So one of the things we love with the energy products is metal housings. What we love even more, though, is the fact that they're American design and engineering, American support. The support from China on power stations can be pretty dismal. We've had some really big names, and there's no sense in mentioning them because it's not our job to hurt other people's businesses. But we've opened tickets on a Wednesday and got a response the following Friday that said, well, since you have a YouTube channel, you should talk to whoever the person was in this company that sent you the power station. We're not going to help. It's just like some of these are pretty expensive. So yeah, back to energy for a second, though. So energy, they've got a bunch of contracts with DOD. It's American owned, American support. There's no companies in America that we're aware of that manufacture power stations domestically. So they are manufactured in China, but it's American engineers in the factories for QA, QC. So it's the best of all the options out there as far as we're concerned at Survival Dispatch. We make no bones about it. So this is not the first time that we've told people energy tech is the way to go. But you mentioned the EMP Shield stuff, which is part of energy's repertoire. I've got a handful of them here. People have seen me pull these out before on our channel. So let's just for a second talk about this one, and I'll let you describe it. So for those people watching, these are called Anderson connectors on the end here. So we've got solar panels and we've connected them to what's called an MPPT supercharger, which basically pulls them all together. And then we plug this sucker in, protects the panels. But what exactly does it do, Mike?
It's a shunt. So I mentioned GFI because I figure most homeowners know what a GFI is. It's that plug that's on your counter near your bathroom sink. It has the test and the reset button. It's a shunt instead of a GFI. But what it does is fractions of a millisecond, it will sense that disruption literally in the air and the charged atmosphere around it, and it will absorb that hit and disperse it to ground before it gets a chance to touch any of the sensitive electronics.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm a layman. I'm not a licensed electrician. Like, I don't own an electrical company that has a national footprint. That's good for the solar side of things. I guess where I wanted to tie this in, and I've got more of these devices that we can discuss in a second. CMEs are a given. Like they're going to happen at various frequencies and various levels of intensity. And if it's anything significant, then we're looking at the same effects that an EMP would have, but potentially a much broader footprint. And you said, okay, well, we're going from, say, 12 months without power to 3 to 6 months. Well, that's still catastrophic for a lot of people. We live in Hurricane Central here in Florida. And when Charlie hit us, we had no power here for 3 weeks, but south of here in New Smyrna Beach, their sections went 3 months with no power. So people are diabetic, that it's an issue for them to store their insulin, not to mention the fact that Florida, of all places with no electricity, no AC, not a whole lot of fun. So the next piece of that would be then this is where this stuff becomes important, right? Because if the grid goes down for an extended period of time, you have to have some way to generate electricity. And if the grid's down and you can't pump gas out of gas pumps, then solar is probably the best option unless I'm missing something. But if you invest all that money in a solar PV system and don't protect it, if the grid goes down, it's probably going with it, right?
The panels itself, a solar flare or an EMP would not affect the panel itself. The panel is a piece of burnt copper, essentially, to just keep it simple. So there's really nothing in there that would get hurt on the panel's ability to generate. It's at your inverters and your batteries that you want to protect. So that's why the battery storage is big. All the companies are talking about it. Power companies are talking about it. Having that battery storage is essential. Protecting that inverter and that battery storage is the key component, because if you got the panels and then the inverter and their batteries are fried, you can't generate any power. So that device you have in your hand is literally worth its weight in gold when you put that between your solar panels and your inverter and batteries.
I'm Jason Sawyer with Survival Dispatch. As a Survival Dispatch insider, you'll be able to gain the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. They'll provide crucial information on such things as stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans. You will receive specific actionable plans. Visit survivaldispatch.com to get started.
So connect the dots here for me, Mike. So this one here that's in between your solar panels and your inverter is protection on the backside of the inverter, which protects the inverter itself, right? And then this one goes on the front end of your battery, which is the next piece after the inverter, and then protects devices plugged into this. Is that
correct?
Like a chain, right?
Exactly. And you can get that device and you can actually put it in your panel. You can do a whole panel protection where the line side coming in. So the way that the electricity operates is the power coming from the grid. There it is right there. So you can imagine if you stack all of these protections, okay, you can be insulated from a CME and or worst case scenario EMP.
Just because I know it's going to come up, there's always the keyboard commandos. Like we had a keyboard commando recently. There was a discussion around these types of devices who said if it smells like bullshit, it's bullshit, and therefore those things don't work. I smell bullshit is what the guy was saying. And my reply back to him was, well, that's very scientific, appreciate that. Where's your evidence, so to speak? So we EMP Shield advertise and have third-party labs that have tested that these things react in about 500 trillionths of a second. There's half a dozen DoD specifications. So these are used in multiple installations. I come from the tech industry, so Sun Microsystems. And I can tell you there's been EMP protection in our DoD installations for many, many years that predates the stuff from EMP Shield. But the EMP Shield, in my research, is the most modern, sophisticated stuff out there. So if we've got to have some sort of generation, right? So solar or wind or something along those lines, if we're back in the dark ages. So we're protecting it here. And then if we're feeding power out from there, if we have a say whole home backup, then this is the type of device that we put in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then if we don't have a whole home backup, but we're trying to back up stuff that we would plug into a power station like an Energy Flex, then this would be our option.
Exactly.
Okay. I have enough knowledge on this stuff to be dangerous. I don't position myself as a subject matter expert. So then I've got a couple more devices, and we have some of these in our vehicles, but this one here is a 12-volt system that this is for RVs. So talk to me about that for a second. If the power goes out and everything gets smoked by a CME, a lot of people already have concerns that maybe their vehicle gets knocked out. And I know that most modern vehicles have insulation, may not necessarily hurt them like an EMP or CME, but what happens to an RV that doesn't have this level of protection? Like, what are the components in the RV that get smoked by the EMP or the CME?
Newer RVs, newer vehicles, it's all computer based. I got a Ram 2500. It's got like a sideways laptop on the thing. I can't even turn the air conditioning on unless I touch the screen, right? I remember one day I went to start the thing up and it told me I had to wait because my truck was getting an update. I'm like, what if this was an emergency? I'd be screwed.
Wow.
But so what that does is with the newer vehicles, it protects the computer components. With the vehicles built like 90s, 2000s, the solenoid is what relays when you turn your key. You hear the click. Like if anybody who's ever had a car that didn't want to turn over, you turn the key, you hear that click, 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 click. That's the solenoid. Yep. So that device protects the computer components the solenoid, which activates to turn the motor, and the battery. That's why a lot of preppers know this. If they probably have the vehicles, the old carbureted deals, they got a battery sitting in a Faraday box, which is just a aluminum foil wrapped present to protect what's inside. So these old boy preppers that have been around for a long time, they got those old carbureted trucks. There ain't a single electronic in the damn thing. So if anything happened, they would just take their battery out of the box, throw it in, and be good to go. But for the rest of us who are driving those driving laptops, if you don't have something in place to protect those computer components, you just got a big hunk of metal sitting out there.
So I've got an 82 K20 with 16 inches of lift, 40-inch tires, 383 stroker, punch 60 over. The thing eats transmissions constantly. I've got a really expensive transmission in that hopefully this one will stand up to that engine. And most people go to the electronic version of the transmission, so you don't have to mess around with throttle valves and constant pressure valves and all that kind of mechanical stuff. But my K20 has zero electronics for this specific reason. But like your truck, let me just pull out, this is the latest generation EMP Shield product for those newer vehicles like yours. They make a earlier generation that's more so the size of this guy, but this is a newer one. I think the first generation is a few $100, and I think this one's somewhere around $440. It literally took longer to drill the holes and mount this on one of our vehicles than it did to connect the wires.
EMP Shield is really revolutionized, and there's other brands out there, and I mentioned EMP Shield because of the thought and the time they've put into creating these things. I stand behind their product 100%. And I'm here today talking to you to just get the information out there. There's a lot of stuff going on that is making the sun very active. So I lean heavily on the coronal mass ejection side of things and what that can do as a whole to the country. But at the end of the day, the more people we talk to, the more products we get into the vehicles, then the less damage it's going to have overall.
I like the way you stated earlier. It's a multi-layered strategy, right?
Yeah.
So the more layers, it's kind of like physical security. The more layers of protection you have, the less likely that you're going to be compromised. So I just want to kind of do a quick recap here, just to baseline everything. So CMEs, much more probable than EMPs, significantly more power behind them, power to damage and take things out. Could feasibly take out the entire world, but could even take, we've got 3 grids, East, West, Texas, could take one of those grids out just like that. And it would take years to replace all of those substations and transformers. So I just want to recap here. If we accept the fact that we're a first world country with third world power grid, I like the way you stated that, and we therefore have our own power source, which is solar. And then we have something to store that power, batteries, that we need to protect each phase of that backup system, essentially. And if we invest in that stuff, the grid might go down in Florida here because we have a hurricane and our PV system, the photovoltaic solar system, keeps functioning. But if it's a CME and we haven't protected it, it's been a waste of time, basically, right?
If there's a CME or EMP and you didn't protect it, the whole system is useless. Obviously, there's guys out there that could come in if they had the components that were on Friday, they could fix it. But in the event when you need that portable power that you've put together, you want to protect it. It's just that new layer, like the GFIs in homes came into play when the National Electrical Code came in, right? They used to just have regular plugs by a counter or in a bathroom. And if you were wet hands and you made a mistake of reaching over and touching a plug or being too close to it, you'd get lit up and there was no protection and you get electrocuted and died. So GFIs became the norm, right? So it became written in that you had to have a GFI so you don't get electrocuted. With the modern GFI, you could put your hands in the water, you could plug something in and touch those prongs. It's going to hit the GFI before you get electrocuted. So you'd be fine. So with that said, as we become more modern as a civilization and we realize all of these threats that we have from the big light bulb in the sky and or an EMP from someone who doesn't like us, we need to start to implement this as normal code. If you're going to buy a solar array with inverters and batteries, right now it's optional, right? It's offered to you that you can do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people, they look at the up cost and they don't want to do it. So it will hopefully get to a point here very soon where it's just included, that this is part of the package. If you're going to buy this solar array, we install phases 1, 2, and 3 if needed. And then you can have the option to do your RV or your car. But if you're going to put solar inverters and batteries on your house, these should just become part of the package, no option on it. And then you educate why. Like a GFI, you're never going to get a homeowner to argue about putting a GFI near a water source.
I started to go down this path earlier, but didn't complete my thought. So what's your comment for the naysayers, the keyboard warriors down below who say that it's bullshit, these things don't do anything to protect you? As a master electrician, not just an owner of a business, but an actual hands-on guy, how do you respond to that? What's your response?
I would say if they want to lean on that and not put any of this in, and in the event something happens, then they can be sitting on the crap end of that stick. The technology works. The military is actively pursuing and installing the tech as we speak. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. I don't know how else to put it.
So I got a layman's question for you, and I know that you're not like an ASTM testing engineer or anything like that, but how do you test these things against the DoD specifications, like at a high level, without getting too complex?
Well, so we talked about the EMP and how a low yield nuclear device could do it. The tech is so advanced nowadays, you don't even need that nuclear detonation to make it happen. You can literally, with an old Altoids can and a couple of YouTube videos, create a pocket-sized EMP that could take out a 10-foot circle and smoke some laptops around you. It's wild where the technology has gone to. So
you can't call yourself a prepper if you don't have all.
So my point is these labs that test this, they have the ability to create an EMP without detonating a nuke. They put it in a big Faraday box, and they have electronics going, and they have their little portable EMP generating device, and they fire it off and they test the technology. I don't want to dive down the rabbit hole too much, but
that's fine.
You think of the military and how advanced they are. You think of drones, right? You got these shows that they do, and instead of fireworks now is where you got 2,000 to 5,000 drones in the sky. I don't want to go down the doom and gloom of what you can do with drone technology, but unmanned aircraft is a thing. Drones is a thing.
We actually went down that rabbit hole 2 days ago with the last episode of Survival Dispatch News on the Iranians using swarm technology to control multiple drones to attack Saudi Arabia in 2019. And there's some open source intel that basically says they want to do the same thing here, but with fentanyl. So drones with fentanyl. Last Thursday's NFL game, a drone flew into the stadium. The game was paused. Nobody knew who owned the drone, and everybody's standing there, the players, and everybody's looking up at it like deer caught in the headlights, I should say. And it would take nothing for those consumer level drones to carry a kilogram, couple pounds of fentanyl, drop them, one operator controlling 500,000 of the drones simultaneously. So sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you can aerosol just about anything. But my point are they able to test it? Of course, because we all know the military has been ahead 100 years, whatever you want to call it. I remember watching Star Trek as a kid, and they had the earpieces in and the tablets, and now lo and behold, right? So military is aware of the technology and the ability to use drones as a threat. So they have the ability to create small-sized EMPs when necessary. So these things, for those naysayers, those keyboard warriors that want to say these things don't work, they're tested in a controlled environment with actual EMPs to see what happens when you launch it at a device. So they're testing this stuff.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Mike. I appreciate you expanding on that, because I didn't have a good answer for that. I know that the DoD has these specifications, and I know that EMP Shield and Energy have passed those tests. What I didn't know is how they actually test it. So thank you for teaching me that as well. So before we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to add as far as advice for the prepping community, the survival community, on protecting against CMEs in particular, EMPs to a lesser extent because they're not as likely?
So to build on the layered system, right? So EMP Shield is one of the handful of products that are out there from different companies that are making it. If you're going to get portable power, put the shunt in place, put the EMP Shield in place, or if you prefer another brand because you follow whomever, all it is the shunt. You want the proven technology that has been tested and it works. Do your panels, do your inverters, do your batteries, and put the protection in place. I'm a fan of the whole panel protector, especially when you have a system that already exists and it goes to your inverter, and then you feed your panel, which you would shut your main panel off in the event of a power outage, whether it be weather, hurricane, CME. You shut one panel off and you turn on your backup panel. So if you're going to have that in your house, I would just do the whole panel protector. Both panels come in line side, protect everything downstream, and then protect your inverters. You can hire a licensed electrical contractor, electrician to put this stuff in for you. We're a national company. We could help somebody no matter where they're, Alaska, Hawaii, it doesn't matter. If you're in the continental US, Switch It Up could help you. But I do want to add, on top of that, as an additional protection, is Faraday bags. Faraday bags are great to have. You showed me one, the biggest Faraday bag I've ever seen.
My wife jumped out of
it. You could put just about anything in there, and they make them small enough for cell phone, for laptops. I do believe that everybody should have a tablet or an old cell phone that has the GPS link that you could put in a Faraday bag, and you seal that thing. Because in the event that this happens, there are going to be satellites out there that are protected. GPS, global positioning system, would still be active. So a big suggestion, and I do this myself, is I have an old cell phone and a Faraday bag. In the event anything happens, I can pull that thing out and put the battery in. Don't leave the battery in it. That's the other thing. Separate it, take the battery out. But in the event, you can turn the thing on. And if there's emergency broadcasting that needs to happen, obviously we know that they've always had the radios and the emergency broadcast, but satellites that are protected in space will start doing emergency broadcasting. GPS will still stay online on your cell phones. So I highly suggest get a Faraday bag, put a cell phone in it, put a tablet in it. But at a minimum, protect your solar panels.
One last question before we wrap it up. So from a best practices perspective, if you were protecting against EMPs, theoretically, you should have multiple radios in a Faraday bag, whether this is a GMRS radio, but basically the same thing as a ham radio, because the idea is that if we're attacked with EMPs, there'll probably be waves of them. And the concern would be that you crack open your Faraday bag, you pull your radio out, and here comes the second wave. Now it's toast as well. My question is this: when CMEs hit us, is it in waves, or is it just like a tidal wave and then it's gone?
It's a tidal wave and when it's gone. So if you follow solar activity, they're always looking for sunspots. When you get that dark circle on the sun, when they call it earth facing, that's when you got to be concerned. Those dark circles is what creates that plasma rip away. So okay, if you're ever following space weather, they always talk about earth facing sunspots. That's when you have to be concerned. So normally, to answer your question, no, they don't come in waves. It's usually one that rips away and hits, and then that sunspot is not facing Earth anymore.
All right. So you're going to make a liar out of me. I said one more question, but now I got another one. I've never even considered tracking space weather. Is there a particular website that's the best? I'm sure there's probably more than one, or is this a government thing like NASA?
There's a bunch of different websites. They have apps that track space weather and solar activity. So anybody in the prepping community, I bet at least half of your community are already following this. A lot of the prepper community very educated on the if, ands, whats, whys, and what could happen. But if you're not, get the space weather app, because they will literally show you the sun and it'll tell you if you got incoming sunspots that we have to worry about. Earth facing is what they call them.
Okay. Man, that's fascinating. That was worth the time today alone just to learn that. Earth facing. Okay. Got it. All right. One last time, Mike, where can people find you online?
You can go to switchitupinc.com. or you can call 833-FREE-LED. That is an easy one to remember, but switchitupinc.com, 833-FREE-LED.
Solar, EMP, CME protection, backup power solutions, LED solutions, everything else that falls under services provided by electricians. And again, national footprint. It's impressive.
It's at the end of the day, it's keeping everybody aware. The more of us that are ready for an event like this, the faster we can put communities back together.
That's awesome. All right, Mike, appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing all of that information. I'm sure we'll have you back again.
I appreciate your time as well. Thanks, Chris.
Become a Survival Dispatch Insider. We bring together survival enthusiasts and preppers to share knowledge and skills, which means you can enhance your preparedness for emergencies and ensure the safety of your community. The results you'll get: improve your emergency preparedness by learning skills and strategies from experienced preppers. Build lasting connections with like-minded individuals to share your passion for safety and readiness. Access a wealth of knowledge and resources to assist you in protecting you and your community in certain situations. questions. Go to survivaldispatch.com to get started.